History Center, and it's June the 16th, and we're so lucky to have Jacqueline Kennedy with us, who is going to discuss whatever she wants to discuss, and we're going to start back in her growing up years, perhaps. Where would you like to begin? Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm Jacqueline Thiesen Kennedy, and I was born July the 3rd, 1923 in Atlanta, Georgia, at old, it's called Davis Fisher. It's now Crawford Long, I think. My mother's doctor was Dr. Sawyer, who was a lady doctor.
That's unusual.
Yes.
At that time.
And I am one of 4 children. My mother and father are lifelong Atlantans. My mother, particularly my father, was from Pensacola, Florida. But he came up here to go to Georgia Tech and never went back to live anywhere else. Growing up in Atlanta was like everybody else. I went to Spring Street School, and then to E. Rivers, and then to North Fulton. And they were wonderful, happy years. We all had such a good time. It was so carefree and fun. And when we go downtown, we dressed up. We put on hats, and gloves, and stockings, and acted like ladies. And downtown was so small that we'd go to Rich's or Macy Davison's it was. We would start on the top floor and go all the way down and look at everything and know almost everybody in the store. And we rode the streetcar, and that was great fun. And then it was time to go away to college, and I went to Gunston Hall Junior College in Washington, D.C. And that's where I was when Roosevelt made the announcement that we were at war. We'd just been, a group of us had been to St. Margaret's Episcopal Church that Sunday, and we'd walked home, and we went by some of the embassies, and we saw a bonfire. We all commented. We said, wonder why the Japanese are burning leaves. It was December. And we thought, of course, that that was what they were doing, was burning leaves, and they were really burning the documents, we found out later. And then it was after we got back to school and about time to have lunch, I guess it was, when we heard the announcement that we were at war. But that was very dramatic because a great many of the girls at Gunston Hall were Army and Navy juniors. And, of course, they were terribly distraught, and it was during the next month that we'd hear things at night, and my roommate and I got up one night to peek out in the hall to see what the commotion was, and it was some of the Army and Navy girls leaving to go and tell their fathers goodbye. And I was there with Muffy Marshall, whose uncle was General Marshall, and Louise Leahy, whose grandfather was Admiral Leahy, and quite a number of others. And we often met those people because at Gunston they invited the important people of Washington to the school every Sunday afternoon. So we had an opportunity to meet a great many people in the government. My roommate and I took great advantage of being in Washington. We went to every concert and I think anything to get out of going to school we enjoyed.
How did you come to choose that school?
My mother went to Gunston Hall, and both of my older sisters did, so it never occurred to me to go anyplace else.
How long were you there?
It's a junior college, so I was only there 2 years. So I graduated the following June after Pearl Harbor. Margaret Truman was at school with me. It was a high school as well as a junior college, and she was a senior in high school my second year in college, and we became friends. She was a very, very nice girl, very plain old shoe, and the Trumans came to the school many Sunday afternoons, so we had an opportunity to meet them. And somebody else that I loved being with in Washington was Peter Marshall, who had been in Atlanta, and my roommate and I went to his church several times just because he was so wonderful.
Yes. Agnes Scott girls used to go down. That's where he met his wife also.
Yeah.
I remember reading about that.
I loved the book that she wrote, A Man Named Peter.
Yes.
Then, of course, in Washington, while we were at school after Pearl Harbor, we were encouraged, all the senior girls particularly, to take a Red Cross home nursing course, which we did because they thought we might be necessary for us to be able to do that. So we did, and my roommate reminded me, I had lunch with her yesterday, and she said, we also had to learn to use the switchboard, but I can't ever figure out why we had to do that, but we did. But when we got home, of course, everything was in a turmoil, and we started rolling bandages and knitting. I'm afraid that some poor soldier had a very strange scarf for me, but at least I hope it kept him warm. And we sewed war bonds, and we had something called the Girls' Battalion. And it was, we met, I think it was once a week at the Georgian Terrace for a tea dance. And we met all the young soldiers and sailors, officers I think they were. And it was great fun. We met some awfully nice young men.
When was the point of disembarkation where they directed wherever they were going from Atlanta or Central Point, wasn't it?
I'm not sure about that.
Down on Postilion.
Oh yes, I do remember that. But that was great fun. And when I was doing the Red Cross bandaging, there was a house on West Peachtree. It was a stone house, and I think it eventually was the SAE house for Tech. But during the war, it's where we rolled bandages, and Mrs. Floyd McRae Sr. and Mrs. John Marsh, who was Margaret Mitchell, were the two ladies who were in charge of our Red Cross work, and we were very diligent. And I don't know why they called it rolling them. I don't remember rolling bandages. We made a lot of flat ones.
Folded them.
We all said we had to go and roll bandages.
Yeah.
And I remember I had one pair of silk stockings left, and that was devastating. I donned those stockings 1,000 times.
Well, there was so much rationed also. I don't guess silk stockings weren't even on the list at all, were they?
Well,
because they didn't exist very much.
Well, things were rationed like canned goods, particularly, of course, gasoline. And I remember the butter was just awful. It looked like lard, and then we had little packages of orangey-looking stuff to color it.
Yeah.
And I remember my mother and I used to go out to the farmer's market, and we would buy a bushel of butter beans and shell them, and they had a canning place at the farmer's market, and we all would go over to can our vegetables or whatever we had prepared. But I remember also that our mother had ours stored in the basement because it was cooler. But I can remember those cans popping off many times. They exploded all the time. There was not the best canning process, I guess.
Ooh, I didn't think cans. I knew jars. Cans exploded. Canning process, you think?
I think so. It was just, from the farmer's market. But Atlanta was a very special place to grow up in. And I have the same dear, dear friends that I had in grammar school and all the way through high school, and we're still the best of friends and have lunch frequently.
At some point, you met your husband-to-be.
Oh, I met my first one because he lived around the corner, and his parents were good friends of my parents, but he was 5 years older, so I didn't really see him as much until he came home from the war. And he came home from the war, and Miss May Haverty was having a dinner party, and she called and invited me and said, I want you to come with Herbert Reynolds. And I said, Miss May, I hardly know him. We have nothing in common but our parents. She said, that's all you need, and he's going to pick you up. And that was it.
Really?
And we were married for 38 years. And Herbert had been in the Army for 8 years. And he was stationed at the Panama Canal Zone a long time. He'd been all over the country. And then we had 3 wonderful children and a very happy life, but he had a very bad heart, and he died after we were married 38 years. And then 7 years later, I married George Kennedy, who was also in the service during the war. George was in the Navy, and he flew PBYs in the Pacific. And as he said, he was never in actual combat because it was mostly cargo. They transported cargo and soldiers and things like that.
What sort of cargo did they
Whatever was, I guess they needed, food or supplies or anything, I don't know. He just said cargo.
And you stayed, where he traveled, you stayed?
Well, I didn't marry him, you see, till 14 years ago, but when the war was over when we were married in 1946. So I didn't have to wait for either husband to come home from the war.
Those were times, weren't they? Sometimes scary and sometimes so peaceful.
Absolutely. We knew a lot of boys who were gone. I mean, most of our hometown boys had gone to war, and a number of them were killed, and that was just devastating. I had one awful experience. I wrote to a boy, and I got one of my letters back saying not delivered because he was deceased. And his family hadn't heard it yet, and that was horrible. I didn't say a word until after I heard it from them. But that was a miserable thing. But we all had dates with a lot of the soldiers and the sailors out at the Air Force and had a good time. I'm afraid we had too much of a good time.
That was they were just different times.
It was.
No doubt about it.
Well, I'll regress a minute. I did make my debut. We were the first, although I don't know, it was the second wartime debutante club, and we decided to have only one party. And we had an afternoon reception and a dance that night.
Oh, look at that. Can you hold that up?
Hmm?
Oops.
This is two different pages.
Yeah.
This says the war debutante, and it shows a whole group of people, all good old Atlanta girls, and doing the various things. I was rolling bandages, and they were writing to soldiers, and they were selling war bonds, and dancing and then knitting.
Knitting. Never
Knitting.
learned to knit. Okay, I don't know whether that got shown or not. This was before you were married, I guess.
Oh yes, they were all before I was married. I didn't get married till 1946.
Mm-hmm. And what was his occupation?
Herbert Reynolds, he sold truck trailers, commercial trailers.
Civilian.
After he got out.
What was he when he was in the military?
He was a major in the Army and the artillery.
He was stationed where?
In the canal zone most of the time.
That canal was important.
Well, he said it was
strategic, wasn't it?
right. He said they never knew when it was going to be blown up any minute.
I wonder if they ever tried. I don't
know that. I know that Herbert was very popular when he was there, and he was even elected mayor of Gatun, which is a little tiny village or something right at the canal zone.
That's impressive. Did he like being mayor?
I guess he liked it. He was one of the younger officers, and I think that was a little difficult. He said he grew a mustache and a beard, so he'd look a little older.
Really? And that was his duties, protecting the Panama Canal?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Never read anything about whether there was an attempt at that one or not.
I don't know. I never heard him say.
How long was he there?
He was in the Army for 8 years, and I don't know how long he was there.
And after that, you all came back to Atlanta?
Well, I never left, and he came back to Atlanta, and we made contact after the war, and we were married at All Saints Church.
And then you had your children, and saw them growing up?
Oh yes, I have 3 very fine young people. They're old children now.
Told me one's in New York, and the
My
other
oldest
3...
son, Herbert, lives in New York with his wife, and they have no children. And I have a son, Jack, who lives in Atlanta, and he has one daughter who's beautiful and wonderful, of course. And then my daughter is married to Gary Cruz, and they have 2 children, and Christopher and Rachel. Chris is 13, and Rachel is 12. Almost 12.
Do you ever tell any anecdotes about this time of your life to the grandchildren?
One time, I think both the young children had school projects to interview somebody during the war, and they came over and interviewed George, and then they asked me a few questions, but I was absolutely and also ran. He was the one they were interviewing. So that was their school project. But I don't think the children spend a great deal of time learning about the Second World War. It was too bad because it was a big part of our lives.
They just don't have a frame of reference a lot of times. There's nobody there that is firsthand.
Well, George has airplane models of what he flew in our house, and they have a picture of me christening the plane down in Moody Field, so they know about the war a little bit.
Well, I knew they christened ships. How do you christen a plane?
Same way, you just break a bottle on the nose. I don't know how they asked me, but whoever was the commandant of the Moody Field in Valdosta came to see me. In fact, two nice Army officers came to call upon me and asked me if I would come down to Valdosta and for the celebration of the graduating class and christen a plane. And I was very flattered, and I thought it'd be great fun, so I did. And I know I stayed with Miss Anna Ashley, who was a friend of my mother's, and I did go out to the base, and we pinned on the what do you call them, the wings, the boys' wings, some of them, and then they had a dance that night, and I christened the airplane.
I get to show this one, may I?
Sure.
Not a little blurry. Anyway, that's Miss Jacqueline.
I don't know who
The
the
other one is, we got a name on it. Here we go, Bernard Hurley.
I don't know where he was from, but
Yeah, he got his wings.
he got his wings.
That was unidentified.
Mm-hmm.
Good pictures. How did you get such good pictures?
That was just the invitation to the dance of it was the 43rd graduating class at Moody Air Force Base.
Nice.
Oh, I'll tell you about that.
All right.
During the war years, we were asked to help pick cotton because nobody was around to pick cotton. So a group of us went out and picked cotton, and I want you to know that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, leaning over picking cotton. I finally just sat down on the ground and scooched along and picked the cotton. It was back-breaking work.
Well, you wonder why they don't sit down and pick it if they have to
Because
lean over.
unless you have a little roller scooter thing
Yeah.
to scoot you along, it was not easy. But the farmer fed us great big wonderful vegetable lunch, and they were very grateful that we had helped them out. I'll show you the picture of christening the airplane.
Oh, I don't know if I saw that or not. Which one is it?
I don't know, it was a slick print somewhere. It's over there.
Like your cotton ball had those thorns and hurtful things for the hands. And
It was not an easy task, I can tell you. I have great admiration for them.
dandy. Let me see if I can get this. I want you to hold it, but I'm getting it in focus just that
Okay.
minute. And that's the way we get on a step to you. I wonder.
Step well done.
Yeah.
Whack it.
The first
that
time?
was very
Was that
exciting.
first time success?
Oh, wait, I hit it hard.
Good enough. Did you practice?
No. You just take the bottle and whack it.
I've seen them in the newsreel, and they have to
Sure.
swing 3 or 4
Sure.
times sometimes, and they say that's not good luck for the ship. If you get it the first time, it's the best. And it was named after
Me,
Jacqueline.
yes, the Jacqueline. They left off the E, but that was all right.
They didn't have room to put it in. I don't know. That was Valdosta.
That was at Moody Field, Valdosta. Mm-hmm.
What'd you do after that?
Well, the war was over, and we got married and had children. And
Stay busy.
Stayed busy from then on. As you know, you had to ring around the rosy with 3 children, everybody going in different directions.
I don't know why they do that.
My children went to the Lovett School, and they loved it. It was wonderful. They had a wonderful education. Then they went on to greater things.
Some went off to college.
Yes, Herbert and Nancy both went to the University of the South at Sewanee. Herbert then went to Columbia in New York to get his master's, and Nancy went to Vanderbilt to get her Juris Doctorate, whatever, for be a lawyer. Jurisprudence, I guess they call it. And Jack went to Georgia State. And they all graduated, and my husband and I said that was our greatest achievement, to have all those diplomas on the wall.
I think I feel that way. None of them went to your school in Washington, D.C.
No, they wanted higher education than that.
What did you think when you first heard the news about Pearl Harbor?
Well, of course, we were distraught. But there we were, right in the middle of Washington. And it was a little scary, too. We didn't know when we might be hit or something. But we had a darling Japanese girl who was a student. And she didn't ever come back to school, of course. After that Friday, she left on Friday perfectly normally, and that was the end of her.
It's probably news to her, too, wasn't it?
Probably so.
Because the Japanese, I can't say embassy, I don't know the title, but they were diplomats in Washington negotiating. Pictures
Supposedly negotiating, but they waited until it had already been bombed, I think, before they ever negotiated. But that was pretty exciting times, because there were so many prominent people, and everywhere we'd go to the concerts and everything else, you'd see all these men that you saw in the newsreel, and it was very exciting. And then when we came home, it was all the boys were gone. Most of them had gone off to war. The only ones who were here were the ones who went to Emory, who were going to be doctors or something like that.
Maybe ministers, I think that was theology school, perhaps. I don't know about that. Probably doctors. Yeah. Times change, just like it was. Turn a switch.
Right.
It's true.
But I lived in very exciting times, and Atlanta was a very happy place to grow up in.
It's grown up so much, and it's changed so much.
It's changed terribly. I'm not crazy about it. It's too big for me.
Head for the hills.
We used to go downtown on a streetcar. I knew everybody. And I don't go downtown at all now if I can help it, and don't know anybody when I'm there.
Right. Now it's like any other big city. But it wasn't so big back then. I guess that was maybe the difference.
But we had opera, and the Metropolitan came every year, and that was really wonderful. It was so exciting, and I loved the opera and went every year, and that was fun. And the Junior League and the Atlanta, I guess the Atlanta Opera Association brought them every year.
Was that where they had it at the Erlanger?
No, they had it at the Fox Theater. And most of the stars stayed at the Georgian Terrace.
Certainly, across the street.
Right across the street, and that was fun to see them after the performance and all, sometimes going back over there.
Get to meet them, maybe.
Well, the driving club always had a big party after one of the operas, and I think Capital City did, different clubs did. And we'd go to the party, and then they would sing. They just stand up and sing. It was very exciting. But then things got more organized. And I think it was during Mr. Bing's tenure that he stopped that. And they still had parties, but it was a performance that was planned.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any spontaneous singing or anything like that.
It's too bad. I guess that was just his decision. I don't know if unions had come in then or not.
I'm not sure about that.
And then there was maybe the thing about the the time Mr. Reynolds passed on.
He died in 1984.
84. And somewhere down the line, you met Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah, well, I'd known him a long, long time. I knew his wife very well, and we'd been friends and lived nearby. But we didn't start having dates until 7 years later and got married. And it's been a very happy union for the last 15 years.
Very fortunate for both of
We think so.
you. When you met, well, not Mr. Reynolds, did you know that you were going to get married? She was a matchmaker, your hostess.
Oh, well, I didn't know that night, but we started going out together and enjoyed each other and got more serious as time went on.
That's a nice story.
It's been a nice life.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the movies where you have these terrible courtships and misunderstandings and somebody gets lost and so forth.
No, none of that. Just plain old shoe we wore.
Oh, I think it progressed in the best possible way.
I remember thinking about all the songs during the war. All of them related to the boys overseas. You know,
I remember the one, Till We Meet Again.
Yes, Till We Meet Again, and I'll Be Seeing You, and Kiss Me Once, and Kiss Me Twice, and Kiss Me Once Again, and then the Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree with anyone else but me.
Well, that was the one I already jitterbug to, I think. Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree.
Until I come marching home.
Yeah.
Wonderful music. Wonderful music. Was wonderful. Still is.
Well, I don't think anything's topped it.
No.
It hadn't had much competition.
No, none at all.
Very nice. Remember when Gone with the Wind came to Atlanta?
Oh, what a thrill that was. Yes, I went to the party the night before. I think I was about 15, and there were a group of us that had one of the girls had a dinner party, and we all went, and we were in a box. It was in the old auditorium, and it was all the way across the auditorium was where the stars were.
The old auditorium. Was that on Edgewood?
It's all the way right smack in the middle of downtown, near where Georgia State University is.
All right. It's not there now, is it?
I don't know.
Unless there's something else. That was the auditorium.
My sister was
Did the
7 years older, and she and her friends were the girls who were dressed in the costumes of Gone with the Wind. But it was very exciting, very romantic, I remember.
Did you see the movie that week?
Oh, yes, of course. And I've seen it 1,000 times since, I think.
When Clark Gable went out the door, did the audience applaud?
Oh, yes. And another thing is that during the war, Peggy Mitchell and her husband John were wonderful to the soldiers and sailors. Now, these were the enlisted men mostly. Mm-hmm. And very, very frequently on a Sunday night, she asked me and another girl or two to have dinner with them. And we'd go to the driving club, and she'd always have some soldiers or sailors. I say no officers. They were always the enlisted men. But I think it must have been a thrill for those boys to have been invited by Mr. and Mrs. Marsh, who turned out to be Margaret Mitchell.
I get the feeling they were warm and interested hosts. She was so friendly.
Oh, absolutely.
I said, she wasn't 5 feet tall, was she?
Tiny little somebody.
Yeah. And
just full of pep and vitality and vim and vigor. She was fun.
Did she ever talk about her book?
Not to me. I don't think we ever occurred to us to ask her about it. We were young and I guess more interested in the soldiers and sailors at that point.
Well, they said after she sold the book to the movies, that was the end of it for her, and she wouldn't comment or do anything. But she did go see the movie, of course.
Oh, yes, she went to the premiere.
Yeah. If they ever expected her to kid, but she never did. She also said, I think, that was the only book she was going to write.
Well, that was enough.
That covered it pretty well, yeah. Did you hear her say that? I think it was printed.
I didn't hear her say that. I heard her talking about, I don't know what the occasion was, but some publishers were here. And of course, she was a writer for the Constitution. And she was invited to luncheon for all these people, and she sat next to some man, and that she casually said, I've written a book, and he said, oh, I'd like to read it. And she said, well, it's in shoe boxes. And she said, well, send me one. So she did, and said he sent her a telegram or called her or something and said, send more shoe boxes.
Really? So that was a go from the first, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. It was the publisher, whoever.
I don't know who published it.
I don't remember.
Remember, it was about the biggest novel I'd ever seen when they got it on the
I know, and it was really considered quite risque. And my mother didn't want me to read it when I was so very young.
That's right, but it was a hit from the beginning. But I understood that she wrote the book. She was home looking after a relative. Maybe her father was ailing or something.
I don't think so.
No.
Because they said she wrote most of it when she was living in the little apartment that's now the Margaret Mitchell house. She called it the dump. It was just a little tiny apartment in that house. And when you go there, they show her typewriter and everything, and they say that's where she wrote most of it, so, but I don't know.
Yeah. Why'd she call it a dump?
That's because it was just an old house at the time, and these were lots of little tiny nooks and cranny apartments. You know, they were not normal. They were just very small.
But think of the location.
Now.
Yes. What,
Well,
10th Street and Peach Street? Somewhere.
10th and Peach Street.
Yeah.
I think it's 10th.
Perfect location.
Well, it's not on Peach Street either. Is it on Peach Street? Or is it on?
Street.
It's on
It might have been 10th Street or 11th, something like that.
something like that.
Yeah. They've got a MARTA station there. Interesting. You know a lot of celebrities.
I did. I had a very interesting growing up years.
You met General Marshall? Because his daughter was in your school?
No, she was his niece.
Niece.
And Admiral Leahy's granddaughter. But we was just a how-do-you-do. We walked along, you know, nothing exciting, except with the Trumans, and we did sit down and visit with them, because they were there a lot. And Margaret came to Atlanta for her concert. That was a terrible disaster, but she called me and invited me to come to tea. So I went to the Biltmore, and I went to the desk, and I asked for Miss Truman's number, the room number. They said, I'm sorry, we can't give that out. And I gave them my name, and I said, I've been invited to have tea. And so the clerk said, you go up to the 5th floor, the 6th floor, or some floor. So I got to that floor, and the elevator opened, and there sat an enormous big Secret Service man. And he had a list of the people that had been invited, and he checked me off, and I could go in. So that was fun. And then I had a luncheon for her. And Ann Quinn, Mrs. Hugh Quinn, had gone to George Washington University with Margaret, and they were friends. So I asked Ann to pick her up, and she did. And my brother had come back from the war, and he was at Tech, and I told him that I was having. He said, "Oh, I'm gonna come over there." And I said, "Well, you're not invited." He said, "That's all right. I'm just gonna come and hang around because I want to see the Secret Service." And he was so disappointed because Ann Quinn brought Margaret Truman. There wasn't any Secret Service. But we had a very pleasant time, and she told us all sorts of little anecdotes about moving into the White House and about her piano, that when they put it, the leg went through the floor, and that's when they found out that it had to be renovated because all the timbers underneath were scorched from the War of 1812.
Really? Never heard of that.
So that's why they moved to Blair House, and they lived there most of the time that Mr. Truman was the president, because, you know, that was when he did over the whole White House.
Yeah, they spent most of their time across the street. That's right.
But she told us lots of fun little stories about growing up up, or being there, not growing up because she was grown. I can't think of any other exciting things that happened. I keep regressing.
Well, you skipped a little bit, I think, because she came to Atlanta to do a concert, which apparently wasn't successful.
Wasn't too successful. I made my husband go, and Ann McCarty had also gone to Gunston with her, and Ann Otley went, and the Hugh Quinns, and we all, with that great anticipation, because we were invited to come backstage afterwards, and I thought the boys were going to get up and leave because it was a pretty punk concert. She had a very sweet, nice voice, but no concert voice.
Oh dear, I bet she felt badly about that too, didn't she?
I don't think so. I think she thought she was splendid. I don't know.
All right. That was interesting, though.
She sang in the choir at school and the glee club and all that, and that was lovely. I mean, she had a lovely voice.
I think I heard her sing it one time. It was all right. So I couldn't have done it.
No, I couldn't either. I said she had a lovely voice, but not a operatic voice or concert.
Now she's written a couple of books herself.
And she's a nice, nice girl, and she was not a pretty girl, but she made the most of herself. She had beautiful skin and hair, and she wore very good-looking, simple, elegant clothes, and as I said, she really made the most of herself.
Well, her parents were so nice. As you said, these were interesting times. Did you, I know you did a lot of volunteer work. Do you want to cover some of that?
Well, from the war years was the rolling of the bandages and selling war bonds and dancing with the soldiers. That wasn't voluntary, but it certainly was fun. And I did a lot of work in the junior league later, but that was with the speech school and the normal things like that that everybody does. I didn't do anything outstanding.
You did a lot of volunteering. I don't guess you even thought about employment, considering all the other things you attended to.
I did a lot at my church during the time. Herb and I taught Sunday school for about 6 years, and I was, on the altar guild and things like that. And I was chairman of my church circle, and
your days were pretty well filled.
Sure, but those were, I say, normal activities that everybody did.
I don't want to leave out anything, so what would you tell your grandchildren?
I haven't told them anything.
I mean, just general conclusions about where you were and how it went.
Well, I'll tell you the truth, I've got this grown granddaughter, and I haven't told her anything about growing up in Atlanta, but I don't think she's ever asked me. And then, as I said, the younger ones had school projects, and they interviewed us, but
I'm so glad you did.
But I still don't think the young people can quite grasp the horrors of the Second World War and the devastation and everything else that was in Europe.
Every neighborhood lost members.
I was in Dresden a few years ago, and a man was the tour guide. We were taking a city tour, and he was talking about all the wonderful things that went on when the communists were there. He said, my daughter got to go to ballet school, and we had this, and we had that, and we had the other thing, and he said that the Americans, he said Roosevelt and Churchill bombed our beautiful city, and he kept going on, and I couldn't stand it. And finally I said, but you're free, aren't you? And he said yes, and didn't say another word. So, but it just irritated me.
Well, he wasn't gracious. What was his nationality?
He was German.
Talking about communist.
Well, he was they lived in Dresden. And the Russians took over.
Oh, yeah, that's probably explains some of his reaction, perhaps. I don't know.
And that is a beautiful city, and it still is a beautiful city, and they had left some of the bombed out things. You could see the ruins of different churches.
What year were you there in Dresden?
Oh, gosh.
Before the wall came
Oh,
down?
no, this was after Herbert died. It was after 84 sometime in that area, somewhere in that next...
Somewhere 87, 89, the wall came down. I'm not very much.
I'm not sure.
So he was still in East Germany, maybe.
Maybe, but I think the Dresden Museum is the most beautiful place I've ever been. Just magnificent. They had saved everything. I think I understood that people had taken things and put them in caves and all sorts of places, but it is simply glorious.
I've not heard of anybody mention that. Did you tell us about that?
Well, it's just that we were going in, and my sister and I were traveling together, and I said, look at those gorgeous canalettos. She said, shh.
What is that?
How do you know they're canalettos? I said, well, I took history of art at school, and they were, of course, magnificent paintings, and then the crown jewels, and it just was a gloriously beautiful museum. Lots of fine paintings. I loved it.
Yeah. You spend a long time there?
Oh,
Half a
yes.
day, all day?
Oh, yes. You have to see it. You really, everywhere we went, seems to me, it was, I adored every place I've ever been in Europe, and I'd like to go back to every time I said, where would you like to go? I'd like to go in. But I loved it all.
On that tour, where else were you?
That time, we went on a little trip down the Elbe River. We started in Berlin, and it was right after, just about a week after the Berlin Wall came down. And we were only the second ship to go down a boat, I guess they call them, because they were river boats, down the Elbe River, and that's when we went to Dresden. But Berlin was a magnificent city, too, but it was pretty well bombed out when we saw it. It had not been restored. We did see Checkpoint Charlie, all those things. But one thing we saw in Berlin, though, that was a thrill to me, we had gone to the Pergamon Museum, where they have the Pergamon altars, and there was a poster in the museum of Nefertiti. And I said, oh, is Nefertiti here? And the lady at the desk said, no, she's in a little museum. So we got in a taxi and went to that little museum. It was in a little house. And we went up the steps, and it was pitch black dark. And across the way, you could see this one light. And in this black room with this one light was on, the head statue of Nefertiti. It was the most dramatic thing you've ever seen, and gloriously beautiful. Excuse me. And dry.
We were so fortunate to have all those good trips. Pergamon was a word I didn't recognize.
Pergamon altars, they came from Egypt, I think. I think. Don't bend me down. Exciting.
I think it's been exciting.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you very much. It was a real treat for me to be here.
Have all this history you've given us. Did you want to mention any of the other cities you visited? European?
I've been all over you.
All over. Saw all the museums.
I loved it all.
I'm surprised at the attendant who said what he said.
Maybe mad.
Yes. I can understand that.
Well, one thing that was exciting, when I was at Gunston Hall, it was Roosevelt's third inaugural, and the school had seats right across from the White House.
Really?
And that was very exciting. I was embarrassed because all the state cars went by. Each governor had a car, and they'd just go by very great dignity past the president. except Georgia. Georgia came along, and the back door opened, and Herman Talmadge poked his foot out and waved with his red suspenders. And of course, I was, 17 or 18 years old, and I was embarrassed for the whole state of Georgia.
Well, he had his own style. Did he exit from the back?
Oh, no, didn't exit at all. Just put his foot out. We had a running board, in cars then.
I had forgotten to say they bring them back.
Well,
yeah, some of the Suburbans, I'm not sure. So that's what Talmadge was. He did come to the parade, though.
Every state. And the Union was recognized. I mean, everybody was there. But that was very exciting because that'll never happen again, I don't think.
Probably not. So you have to have too many guards nowadays anyway.
I don't think that there's been a president that we want for 3 years. I mean, for 3 terms.
Well, they put that in the law, didn't they? Two, and that's it. For governor of Georgia, too, also, isn't it?
I think so.
Well, I want to say thank you again.
Thank you
Hope you
again.
come back.
Enjoyed
I know
meeting
you got a lot more to tell us that we don't think of this morning. And
I don't know. I didn't think I had anything to tell you, so.
Oh, yes. Okay.